Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. In today's video, we're going to talk about one of the hot topics of conversation this week, and that's the possibility of Kyle Larson receiving a playoff waiver from NASCAR after missing Sunday's Coca-Cola 600. Joey Logano offered some thoughts on the subject this week. Larry McReynolds called Logano out for his thoughts. Logano has responded. I also have a little news nugget from Logano's Penske teammate, Ryan Blaney, who shared a funny post on X today, calling out the new repave at Iowa. Roger Penske's boys have some opinions. Plus, this week, Hailie Deegan's team made a surprise move with hopes to help improve the number 15 Xfinity Series car. I'll discuss that. Plus, after a little break due to the All-Star race, our By the Numbers segment returns, and we have some interesting stats to talk about, including how Alex Bowman is currently the best driver at HMS. Plus, I'll also have a breakdown of the Stewart-Haas Racing drivers and who is the best candidate to land another ride in 2025. However, before we dive into those numbers, let's talk about the potential of Kyle Larson receiving a playoff waiver from NASCAR after he missed the rain-shortened Coke 600. I know I've heard the arguments for both sides of the issue. Some say it's a no-brainer, and Larson should receive the waiver because he was doing the double, and that's not just good for NASCAR, but good for motorsports overall. Others, however, suggest it's not as cut and dried. On Tuesday, Joey Logano fell into the latter category during his appearance on his Behind the Wheel segment on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio.
About the grayest rule we have in our sport. It can be black and white, but it's not. And so it's pretty gray. And here's some scenarios where it can get gray. It's one thing if you get hurt in the race car. That's black and white, in my opinion. If you're driving a cup car, you get hurt, well, in a NASCAR cup car, the waiver makes sense to me. To where you can still compete in the playoffs if you make the playoffs. If you get in a car accident driving down the road, does that deserve a waiver? Maybe. If you weren't speeding down the highway driving like an idiot, maybe. The scenario that happened last year, Chase Elliott gets hurt snowboarding. Do you get a waiver there? Pretty gray. Pretty gray. I don't know. I don't know the right answer, but we all know what happened. This scenario, let's be honest here, super cool what Kyle Larson did. Running the double, awesome. He got backed into the worst position possible for the scenario that happened, right? Because of the rain and delay of the Indy 500, all that. But he chose, it's his decision. He decided the Indy 500 is more important than the Coca-Cola 600. He made that decision. Or his people, whoever, he is part of it, he made the decision. He put IndyCar ahead of NASCAR. That's the facts. Right or wrong, I don't know. Waiver or not, I don't know. I'm not here to make that decision. But the facts are, he thought IndyCar racing was a bigger race than NASCAR racing that day.
Interestingly, Logano wasn't done. Moments later, he proposed examples of other possible gray areas for receiving the waiver.
This decision, say, okay, we win a race. Let's just say next week we win a gateway. That would be great. And I decide, you know what? There's this race in Le Mans I want to run. Let's just say I want to run that. Can I do that? Shoot, say I just want to take a week off. Can I do that? It opens a can of worms is what I'm trying to say. It opens a can of worms. What can I do? So maybe I want to run a late model somewhere. Can I do that?
Mm-hmm. You're not getting any argument from me. I agree with you. I don't think...
It's just not a simple... I said it's the grayest thing we have in our sports. There's no black and white answer to this one. Or there can be, but we don't treat it that way.
Unsurprisingly, those remarks got the attention of fans who responded to the post on X. They also got the attention of Larry McReynolds, who didn't sugarcoat what he thought about it, including calling out Logano specifically for what he had to say.
Let's continue with the Joey Logano interview. He said, what if I win a race, I decide to take a week off and go to the Bahamas? Come on, Joey, really? Seriously? Are we really apples and apples here? Are we even in both in the food group, for Pete's sake? And I heard him say, what if I decide to go run a big dirt late model race? Really? Are we comparing apples to apples?
After seeing the response to his remarks on X, which includes more than 580,000 views, the 33-year-old driver provided some clarification. If anyone listened to what I said yesterday, I never picked a side, Logano wrote. I was pointing out the tough decision that NASCAR is in. Since words have been twisted yet again, here's what I think. What Larson did for motorsports was amazing, and he should get the waiver. I don't know about words being twisted, but I do know America's crew chief said something else in his remarks about the waiver and examples of its past use, including one last year that I had completely forgotten about. Take a listen.
There were a couple of other times. I go back to the year of COVID. We had some drivers that tested positive with COVID, and they were granted a waiver because they missed a race. Jimmy Johnson missed Indianapolis, the Brickyard that year. Austin Dillon, I think, missed the Daytona Road Course. So I've given you exhibit A, B, C, and D of why I think the waiver was created. Now, to me, granting a waiver to a guy that gets hurt snowboarding, I'm glad they did, but was that the intent? Speaking of Alex Bowman, was granted a waiver. He got hurt driving a whatever that car was on dirt, where he flipped it and hurt his back. And then we even granted a waiver to a driver, the same driver that got hurt snowboarding. We're going to suspend you. You're going to be suspended because you basically, the NASCAR member code of conduct. You wrecked Denny Hamlin at Charlotte Motor Speedway 1 year ago. You're suspended for a week, but you get the playoff waiver. To me, that's where we really opened the gate pretty darn wide.
Larry Mack is right. Like Logano, he agrees there's no question a driver should get a waiver when injured in NASCAR, like Alex Bowman in 2022. But as Logano suggested, the other areas aren't so clear. And last year, when NASCAR suspended Elliott for intentionally wrecking Hamlin at Charlotte in last year's Coca-Cola 600, but then turned right around and offered him a waiver for missing a race, it effectively, in my opinion, erased any blurring of the waiver. Anyone who misses a race should be eligible for it based on that ruling. Look at it this way. If what Chase Elliott did was a bad look for NASCAR and he still received a waiver, how can officials even consider denying Larson the same exemption after doing something that's very positive for the sport? But, as we all saw with Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s penalty last week, it's NASCAR sandbox and we're all just playing in it. Moving on to Logano's teammate and reigning Cup champion, Ryan Blaney. On Tuesday, a photo was posted on X that showed the repave at Iowa Speedway, where we'll be racing in a few weeks. The photo showed what appeared to be the different grooves on the track with different surfaces. Seriously, look at that photo. Clearly, it's not ideal, and the Team Penske driver responded with a photo of his own, which featured a drawing of a horse that looked normal on the back legs, and then everything moving forward appeared to have been the work of a child. I laughed, but also thought back to my conversation with Blaney a few weeks ago before the All-Star race, when I asked him about potentially hosting Saturday Night Live. He said it's still a possibility, and I'm so hopeful it happens because as this post shows, he's definitely got a sense of humor. Moving on to another subject, but sticking with Ford, except we're dropping down to the Xfinity Series and the number 15 car driven by rookie Hailie Deegan. The 22-year-old has recorded a pair of top 15s through the first dozen races, the most recent coming at Talladega, where she scored her season-best finish of 12th. On Tuesday night, AM Racing announced it had parted ways with Deegan's crew chief, Joe Williams, and replaced him with the organization's director of competition, Matt Lucas. Hearing that news made me think back to last year and the crew chief shuffle Deegan had with ThorSport Racing and the Truck Series. To start the season, her new team gave her Ben Rhodes championship-winning crew chief, Rich Lucius. However, things weren't going well for Deegan, and Lucius returned to Rhodes and the number 99 truck later in the year, which turned out to be a good move as the team won its second title in 3 seasons. As I've said before, I want Deegan to succeed. Everyone should want that because more women racers in the sport will only grow the sport. That said, the changing of crew chiefs in 2 seasons in 2 different series isn't a good look. Will it help? I just don't know. And finally, it's time for our By the Numbers segment. And we're going to start with our last 5 races analysis, and there's been a change at the top. In the first 4 editions of our last 5 races, Chase Elliott stayed steady and held the top position for best average finishing position starting at Dover, where he slightly outpaced Tyler Reddick at 5.8 compared to the 2311 Racing driver's 6.6. A week later, Elliott had actually improved his stranglehold on the top spot, improving to 5.4, while Reddick still held second but dropped 2 full spots to 8.6. After his 12th place result at Darlington, Elliott's average dropped to 7.2, but he was still on top and ahead of Brad Keselowski by 2 full spots. That, however, has changed this week, and the 2020 champion has been supplanted by one of his teammates. And I'm fairly confident you're not thinking of the right one. It's not Kyle Larson or William Byron, but Alex Bowman, who now claims the top spot with an average of 7.4, with 5 consecutive finishes inside the top 10, including his best, a 5th at Talladega. Elliott is now in second for the first time with an 8.4 average. He's followed by Keselowski, Denny Hamlin, who jumped from 10th to 4th, and Martin Truex Jr. comes in at 5th at 11 even. Interestingly, Truex held the 4th position in the last 4 editions of our last 5 races analysis. Josh Berry comes in at 6th at 11.6 and is our biggest mover, jumping from 13th at an average finishing position of 16.8 after Darlington. And he is followed by Ross Chastain, Tyler Reddick, Noah Gragson, who dropped from 3rd in our last analysis, and William Byron. Speaking of Berry and Gragson, we all heard the sad news that Stewart-Haas Racing will be shutting down at the end of the season. Crazy to think how dramatic and fast the decline has been. I've talked about it a lot on the channel over the last year. Now that it's officially coming to an end, there are unfortunately more than 300 employees who will be looking for jobs in 2025. I wish them all well. But for this segment, we're focusing on 4 specific employees who strap inside the cars and their career resumes to see who just might be the best candidate to land a new ride. When you look at the career numbers of the 4 drivers in a side-by-side comparison, it's interesting to say the least. The first thing that I looked at was total career starts. Ryan Preece is definitely the veteran of the group with 165 starts to his credit, followed by Chase Briscoe, Noah Gragson, and Josh Berry. But of all the numbers on this that stuck out to me, it's Preece's DNFs. Seriously, look at that number, 29. Comparing it with Briscoe, who has 43 fewer races, and it's surprising. Now, Gragson has had his share as well, and is actually on pace to top Preece's number. As we all know, the most important stat is wins, and Briscoe got that one at Phoenix in 2022. But sticking with the number 14 car, and the rest of his numbers clearly show he's the top of the SHR drivers with 11 career top 5s, 26 top 10s, and the 2 poles. I think when comparing the other drivers, it's also interesting to see how both Berry and Gragson have a pair of top 5s in their short careers compared to the 3 by Preece. Also look at the number of top 10s. Berry and Gragson are both almost halfway to the mark of Preece's 12 top 10s. For Berry, that's in just 26 races. I think the big takeaway from this is if any teams are looking to hire an SHR driver, Briscoe is unquestionably the best choice based on the stats. However, Gragson and Berry, specifically here lately, have both shown flashes of quality, and a team looking to grow with an up-and-coming driver might opt for either one of those 2 guys. And finally, our last set of numbers is a fun one, and I have to thank Joel Steuben for coming up with this idea. And it's the first round matchups for the Denny Hamlin Bracket Challenge. For those of you who are going to participate, you've got to decide soon, because the deadline for entering is the start of this Sunday's June 2nd race at Gateway. Before you make those picks, take a look at those head-to-head matchup comparisons. You can thank me later. All right, guys, that's a wrap on this episode. I want to hear your thoughts. What did you think about Joey Logano and Larry Mack's comments on the playoff waiver? Do you think Larson should receive the exemption? And what do you think about Hailie Deegan getting a new crew chief? Will it make a difference? And finally, let me know what you think about our By the Numbers segment. Any Alex Bowman fans out there? He's been pretty impressive in the last 5 races. And who do you think from the stable of SHR drivers will land in a Cup car in 2025? Remember, if you want to read my written work, go check it out at heavy.com. Also, go to beatingandbanging.com if you want to sign up for my weekly newsletter, and you'll receive an email each Friday recapping the top stories from the week, including reviews of the various NASCAR-related podcasts. Also, make sure to check out my Beating and Banging podcast on the Blue Wire Network. It's available on your favorite listening platform. Again, thank you so much for supporting the channel, and have a great rest of your day.